People say there are stories that should never be told in daylight. Stories that sound ordinary when the sun is up, but change their shape after midnight. This is one of those stories. If you are listening to this at night, if the room around you is quiet and the world feels paused, then you are exactly where you need to be. And if you are listening during the day, you might want to come back later, because some things only make sense when the clock crosses 12. I didn't believe that at first. I used to think time was just time, that midnight was only a number on a screen or a position of hands on a clock. But the night this story truly began, I learned that midnight is a doorway. It is the hour when the world exhales, when people sleep, when secrets stop hiding behind noise. It is the hour when memories wake up. This story is told only after midnight because that is when it started, and because telling it any earlier feels like a lie. It was a little past 12 when my phone vibrated for the first time. No sound, just that soft buzz against the wooden desk beside my bed. I remember noticing it because I hadn't spoken to anyone that late in weeks. I wasn't expecting messages. I wasn't expecting anything at all. The room was dark except for a thin strip of streetlight slipping through the curtains, painting a pale line across the wall like a quiet warning. The message had no name, just a number I didn't recognize. No profile picture, no greeting, just one sentence. You shouldn't be awake right now. I stared at it longer than I should have. My first thought was that it was a wrong number. My second thought was that someone was trying to scare me. But there was something about the timing, about the way my phone buzzed at exactly 12:07 a.m., that made my stomach tighten. I typed back a simple response. Who is this? The typing dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Seconds stretched longer than they should have. Finally, another message arrived. You don't remember me yet. That word stuck with me. Yet. As if remembering was something scheduled, something unavoidable. I almost laughed it off. I almost put my phone face down and tried to sleep. But before I could, another message came through. Check the clock. I looked at the digital clock on my nightstand. 12:08 a.m. The numbers glowed red in the dark. Normal. Ordinary. I typed back. Okay. Now what? There was no reply. Not right away. I waited, counting my breaths, listening to the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I told myself this was nothing. Just another strange message in a world full of them. Then my phone buzzed again. Do you hear it? I frowned. Hear what? I held my breath, listening. At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly, I noticed something I hadn't before. A low sound, almost like a whispering wind, but the windows were closed. It wasn't coming from outside. It felt closer, as if the sound was inside the room, or maybe inside my head. What am I supposed to hear? I typed. The reply came slower this time. The space between seconds. That's when I sat up in bed. It's hard to explain why those words affected me. Maybe it was the way they echoed something I had felt before, but never named. Or maybe it was because, suddenly, the room felt different. Heavier. Like the air had thickened. I glanced at the clock again. 12:10 a.m. Midnight had already passed, but it felt like the night was just beginning. I asked the obvious question. Why are you messaging me? This time, there was a pause long enough for doubt to creep in. Maybe this was a prank. Maybe someone had guessed my number. But when the reply finally came, my hands went cold. Because you promised you would listen. I didn't remember making any promise. I told myself that memory is unreliable, especially late at night. We forget things all the time. Small details. Old conversations. But this felt different. This felt like something important had been taken from me, not forgotten. I don't know what you're talking about, I wrote. Another pause. Then, that's what you said last time too. Last time. I asked when that was. The response didn't come in words. Instead, my phone screen went dark for a second, then lit up with a single image. It was a photograph of a place I recognized instantly, even though I hadn't seen it in years. A narrow street near my childhood home. The old street light that flickered. The cracked pavement. The bench where I used to sit after school when I didn't want to go home yet. My heart started to race. How did you get this? I typed. You were there at 12:16, the message said. You always were. I checked the clock again, without meaning to. 12:16 a.m. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a conversation. It was a pattern. As the minutes passed, the messages kept coming, always tied to the time. Each one felt like it was peeling something back inside me. Little things at first. A song I used to hum without knowing why. A dream I had as a child that ended the same way every time, right before midnight. The sound of footsteps behind me on empty streets that I always blamed on my imagination. The sender never gave a name, never explained how they knew these things. They just kept reminding me. You hated the dark, but you stayed up anyway. You always listened at doors. You knew the night felt crowded, even when you were alone. With every message, memories stirred, not fully formed, but close enough to hurt. It felt like standing on the edge of something deep, knowing if I leaned forward even a little, I would fall. At some point, I realized I hadn't heard a single car pass outside in a long time. No voices. No distant sounds of the city. It was as if the world beyond my room had gone quiet, holding its breath along with me. What do you want from me? I finally asked. The reply came almost instantly. To finish the story. I swallowed hard. What story? The one you stopped telling, the message said. The one that can only be told after midnight. That sentence sent a chill through me, because it felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Like a line from a book I had once loved and then forgotten. Or a rule I had learned a long time ago and broken. I told the sender I didn't understand. That I was tired. That this was too much. The typing dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again, slower this time. You always say that part, the message read. Right before you remember. Remember what? Before I could ask, the room changed again. The faint whispering sound grew clearer, almost rhythmic, like breathing. I noticed the shadows in the corners of the room seemed deeper, thicker, as if the darkness itself had weight. I checked the time. 12:29 a.m. Another image appeared on my phone. This one made my chest tighten. It was a screenshot of a note, written in my own handwriting. If you're reading this, it means you stayed awake. I didn't remember writing it, but I knew the handwriting was mine. Every loop, every slanted line. The note continued. Do not trust the quiet. Do not look away when the clock changes. And whatever you do, don't let them finish the story without you. My hands were shaking now. Who are they? I typed. The reply took longer than before. You used to know, it finally said. You still do. That's why you can feel them listening. I looked around the room, suddenly aware of how small it felt, how thin the walls were, how easily sound could travel in the quiet of night. This was the moment I considered turning off my phone, pulling the covers over my head, pretending none of this was happening. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't work. The messages weren't just on the screen. They were inside me now, stirring something that had been asleep for years. The sender sent one final message for the night. You have until 12:47. Until 12:47 for what? I asked. To decide if you want to remember on your own, they replied. Or if you want the midnight to do it for you. I watched the clock as the minutes ticked by. Each second felt louder than the last, like a drumbeat counting down to something I wasn't ready to face. My thoughts kept drifting to moments in my life that never made sense. Nights when I woke up exactly at 12:47 for no reason. The way certain streets felt wrong after dark. The feeling that some stories weren't meant to be read, only remembered. At 12:46, my phone buzzed again. You're running out of time, the message said. Just like before. Before what? I typed. Before the reply came, the whispering sound in the room stopped. The silence that followed was so complete it hurt my ears. I stared at the clock as it changed. 12:47 a.m. The phone buzzed one last time. Do you hear it now? I did. Not a sound, exactly. More like a feeling. A pressure behind my eyes. A sense of something leaning in close, waiting for me to open a door I had kept closed for a very long time. That was when the memories started to break through, sharp and sudden. like light through cracks in a wall. Faces I had forgotten. Nights I had erased. A promise made in a whisper, spoken only after midnight, when the world was quiet enough to listen. And just as it all began to come together, as I felt the edge of the story rising inside me, my phone screen went black. No more messages. No more images. Just the clock glowing red in the dark, and the heavy understanding that whatever I had agreed to back then, whatever story I had started and failed to finish, was not done with me yet. Because now I was awake, and the night was listening. I sat there for a long time after the screen went dark, waiting for it to light up again. My thumb hovered over the power button, unsure whether turning the phone off would make things better or worse. The silence in the room felt deliberate, like it had been arranged just for me. Even the ceiling fan seemed quieter, its soft hum uneven, as if it were struggling to keep up with the night. I tried to tell myself that fear was doing this, that my mind was filling in gaps because it didn't like not knowing. But the feeling behind my eyes didn't fade. It stayed there, a dull pressure, as if something unfinished was pushing against my thoughts. I stood up and walked to the window. The street outside looked the same as it always did, but it felt different. Empty in a way that wasn't normal. The streetlights were on, casting pale circles on the road, yet there were no moving shadows, no passing cars, no late-night walkers. It felt frozen, paused at a moment that wasn't meant to last. That was when I noticed the time again. 12:52 a.m. I didn't remember checking the clock so often before tonight. Time had always slipped by without asking for attention. Now every minute felt like it mattered. I went back to the bed and sat down, tried to slow my breathing. This was when my mind began to wander, drifting toward memories I usually avoided. Not because they were painful exactly, but because they felt incomplete, like torn pages from a book I never finished reading. I remembered being younger, staying awake long after everyone else in the house had gone to sleep. I used to tell myself I just wasn't tired, but that wasn't true. I was listening, waiting. Even then, I had the sense that the night was different, that something important happened when the world went quiet. I couldn't have explained it back then, but the feeling was the same one pressing on me now. I also remembered the notebook. I hadn't thought about it in years. A plain, dark-covered notebook I kept hidden under my mattress when I was a teenager. I used to write in it late at night, always after midnight, always by the dim light of a lamp I kept turned low. I never wrote during the day. It felt wrong, like the words wouldn't come out the same way. I stood up again and went to the closet. I didn't know why. I hadn't planned to look for anything. But my hands moved on their own, pushing aside old jackets and boxes. At the back, buried beneath things I hadn't touched since I moved in, was a small cardboard box. My heart started beating faster the moment I saw it. Inside were a few old items I had never thrown away. A broken watch, a key I didn't remember using, and, at the bottom, the notebook. I sat on the floor and opened it slowly, half expecting it to be empty. But the pages were full. My handwriting stared back at me, familiar and strange at the same time. The first page had a date written at the top. No year, just the time. 12:03 a.m. The entries weren't long. Short paragraphs. Observations. Questions. Warnings. Many of them mentioned the same things over and over. Silence. Listening. The feeling of being watched without being seen. One line stood out immediately. They come closer when you stop paying attention. I swallowed hard and turned the page. Another entry mentioned a rule I didn't remember learning. Never tell the story before midnight. It doesn't work. It wakes the wrong things. I flipped through more pages, my hands trembling slightly. The deeper I went, the clearer it became that this wasn't just writing. It was preparation, like I had been training myself for something, leaving instructions for a future version of me that I assumed would remember. But I didn't. I checked the time again. 1:07 a.m. That was when my phone buzzed. I flinched so hard I nearly dropped it. The screen lit up with a single notification. No number this time. No name. Just text. You found it. My throat felt dry as I typed back. You knew I would. Yes, came the reply. You always do. I wanted to ask who they were again, but something told me that question wouldn't get an answer. Instead, I asked the one thing that mattered most. Why can't I remember? The reply didn't come right away. I waited, sitting on the floor with the notebook open in my lap. The house creaked softly, settling into the night. Somewhere far away, a dog barked once, then went quiet. Finally, the phone buzzed. Because you chose not to, the message said. You thought it would protect you. Protect me from what? Before I could ask, another message appeared. You learned too early that stories have weight. That once told, they don't stay still. I looked down at the notebook again, at the careful way I had written each word, like I was afraid of making a mistake. A memory surfaced then, faint but sharp. Sitting in my room as a teenager, heart pounding, convinced that something was standing just outside the door, listening as I wrote. Not watching, listening. Who else knows about this? I typed. The answer came quicker this time. More than before, the message said. Fewer than you fear. That didn't help. I asked about the rules, about the warnings, about why everything seemed tied to specific times. The response came in pieces, spread out over several messages, as if the sender was choosing their words carefully. Midnight is when patterns reset. It's when memories loosen. It's when the story can move without being seen. I felt a chill run through me as I read those words. It sounded less like superstition and more like experience, like someone who had tested these ideas and learned the cost of getting them wrong. Another message arrived. You weren't alone when you started this. I froze. Who was with me? There was a longer pause this time, long enough for my mind to start filling in the blanks on its own. Faces flickered at the edges of my thoughts. People I had known once, then drifted away from without understanding why. You'll remember them, the reply finally said. Not tonight, but soon. The clock read 1:19 a.m. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a message. It was an alarm. I frowned. I hadn't set an alarm. The label beneath the time sent a wave of unease through me. Listen. As the alarm faded, the silence returned, deeper than before. And in that silence, I became aware of something new. Not a sound, but a presence. A sense that the story I had started years ago was no longer content to wait in the pages of a notebook or the gaps in my memory. It was reaching back. And whatever it was connected to, whatever had been listening all this time, knew that I had found the first piece again. I stayed on the floor long after the alarm stopped, the notebook resting open in my hands like something fragile. The word listen kept echoing in my head, even though no sound followed it. I realized then that listening didn't always mean hearing. Sometimes it meant noticing what you usually ignore. The gaps, the pauses, the moments where your mind wants to rush ahead but shouldn't. I closed the notebook slowly and set it beside me. The room felt different now that I knew it was there, like the walls had been holding their breath until I acknowledged it. I wondered how many nights I had slept just a few feet away from this box, completely unaware that a version of me had left something behind on purpose. My phone buzzed again. You feel it now, the message said. That pull. I didn't bother denying it. What happens if I keep going? The reply came with a delay that made my chest tighten. That depends on whether you follow the rules you wrote. I opened the notebook again and flipped to a random page. More rules stared back at me, written with the certainty of someone who had already made mistakes. Never write names after midnight. Never finish a memory in one sitting. Never assume you're alone just because you can't see anyone. I rubbed my face with my hands. Why didn't I just destroy this? I typed. You tried, came the answer. More than once. That surprised me. I searched the notebook for any sign of damage. Burn marks. Torn pages. Anything. But it was intact. Too intact, like it had been protected. Then why is it still here? I asked. Because the story didn't let you, the message said. And because part of you didn't want it gone. That part felt uncomfortably true. I asked about the others again, the people I wasn't alone with. This time, instead of a direct reply, my phone screen changed. A list appeared. Not names, just descriptions. The one who listened too closely. The one who laughed it off. The one who stopped answering messages. My heart sank at the last line. I didn't need names to understand. Faces began to surface, blurry but familiar. A friend who used to stay up late with me on calls that stretched past midnight, talking about strange thoughts we couldn't share during the day. Another who dismissed everything as imagination, until one night they went quiet and never really came back the same. Someone who slowly faded out of my life, without an argument, without a reason. What happened to them? I typed. The reply was careful. Different choices. Different outcomes. That wasn't comforting. I checked the time again. 1:34 a.m. The night felt far from over. The phone buzzed once more. You're asking the wrong questions, the message said. The conflict was never about what you saw. It was about what you agreed to hear. I thought back to the way I used to stay awake, convinced that something important would happen if I listened long enough. Back then, it felt harmless. Curiosity. A need to understand the quiet. I hadn't considered that listening could be a kind of permission. What did I agree to? I asked. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. To carry it, the message finally said. To remember it when others couldn't. A chill ran through me. Carry what? Before I could press further, a new message came through, not from the same thread, but from an unknown contact. No text, just a missed call notification. Time stamped 1:36 a.m. I stared at it, pulse racing. The phone rang again, this time actually ringing. The sound cut through the silence, like a crack in glass. I didn't answer. The ringing stopped after a few seconds, leaving the room even quieter than before. My original contact sent another message almost immediately. They shouldn't be calling yet, it read. My stomach dropped. Who was that? Someone who heard the story without learning the rules. I picked up the notebook again, flipping pages faster now, searching for anything about calls, about contact, about what happens when others get involved. One line near the back caught my eye. If they reach out first, it means the boundary is thinning. I typed with shaking hands. What boundary? The one that keeps this contained, the reply said. The one you helped build. I felt a strange mix of dread and responsibility settle over me. I hadn't just stumbled into something mysterious. I had been part of it. A younger version of me had made choices that shaped whatever this was. And now I was dealing with the consequences without the context. Another call came in. Different number this time. I declined it again, heart pounding. Don't answer, the message warned. Not yet. Why? I asked. Because they don't know how to stop listening. I leaned back against the bed, trying to steady myself. The idea that listening itself could be dangerous felt absurd and yet painfully logical in the middle of the night. Haven't all the worst thoughts come from paying attention to the wrong things for too long? I asked the question that had been forming since I found the notebook. Is this happening again because I'm awake? Yes, came the reply. And because you're close to remembering why you stopped. I closed my eyes, letting fragments of memory float up. A night much like this one, sitting with the notebook open. The sense that something was pushing back, responding to every word I wrote, every thought I lingered on. Fear mixed with excitement. The feeling of being important because something needed me. When I opened my eyes, the clock read 1:48 a.m. Another message arrived. You're not the only one awake tonight. That line made my skin prickle. Who else? I asked. People who shouldn't be, the reply said. People who feel the pull, but don't know its name. I imagined strangers lying in dark rooms, staring at ceilings, feeling restless, without knowing why. People checking their phones for messages that hadn't arrived yet. People listening too closely to the quiet. The phone buzzed again. A text from the unknown number this time. I remember you, it read. My heart skipped. Do not respond. My contact sent immediately after. Not until you understand your part. What is my part? I typed back, frustration creeping into my fear. To decide whether this story keeps spreading, came the answer. Or whether it stays unfinished. I looked down at the notebook one more time, at the empty space on the last page. I realized then that the main conflict wasn't about what was chasing me or who was calling. It was about whether telling this story, even now, was continuing something I once tried to stop. The phone vibrated again, gently this time, like a reminder rather than a warning. Midnight passed, the message said. But the window is still open. I stared at the clock, at the creeping minutes, knowing that every second I stayed awake, every word I remembered, was pulling me deeper into something I had once walked away from on purpose. And somewhere beyond the quiet walls of my room, others were listening too, whether they meant to or not. The idea that others were listening changed everything. Until that moment, the fear had felt personal, contained within the walls of my room and the limits of my memory. Now it felt wider, like a ripple moving outward into the dark. I couldn't stop thinking about the unknown numbers, the missed calls, the message that said, "I remember you." Whoever was on the other end wasn't just curious. They were connected. I typed slowly, choosing my words. "How many people know?" The reply came after a pause that felt deliberate. "More than last time." That was the first real twist of the night. This wasn't a repeat. It was an escalation. I stared at the notebook again, suddenly aware of how thin the pages were, how easily words could pass through time if someone was paying attention. A thought surfaced then, uncomfortable and sharp. What if the notebook wasn't just a record? What if it was a trigger? Another message came in before I could finish that thought. "You didn't just write things down," the sender said. "You left markers." "What kind of markers?" I asked. "The kind that wake people up," came the reply. "At specific times. With specific words." My phone buzzed again, and my chest tightened when I saw a new notification. Not a call. Not a text. A voicemail. From a number I didn't recognize. Time stamped 1:53 a.m. "I didn't send that," my contact wrote immediately. "But you need to hear it. Every instinct told me not to." The notebook had warned against reacting too quickly, against finishing things in one sitting. But curiosity pushed harder than caution. I put the phone to my ear and pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then breathing. Slow, uneven. Someone was on the other end, silent but present. I could hear the faint echo of a room, like they were somewhere empty. Then a voice, low and unsure. "It's happening again," the voice said. "You said it would stop if we stopped listening." The message ended abruptly. My hands were shaking now. I didn't recognize the voice, but I recognized the fear in it. The kind of fear that comes from realizing you broke a rule you didn't fully understand. "Who was that?" I typed. The reply took longer than before. When it came, it wasn't reassuring. "Someone you forgot on purpose." That sentence hit harder than anything else so far. Forgetting felt passive. Forgetting on purpose meant choice. Another message followed. "You told them the story was finished." My mouth went dry. "Was it?" "No," came the answer. "You just stopped telling it." The clock on the wall read 1:58 a.m. Midnight felt farther away now, and yet closer than ever. I asked the question I'd been avoiding. What happens if I finish it? The dots appeared and stayed there for a long time. Long enough for my phone screen to dim slightly. "When you finish it," the message finally said, "it stops belonging to you." A new text came in at the same moment, from the unknown number. "Why did you leave us there?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. The weight of that question settled in my chest like a stone. Leave us where? In the dark? In the story? In the space between remembering and forgetting? I flipped through the notebook again, scanning for anything about endings. Near the back, written in a tighter, more urgent hand, I found a passage I hadn't noticed before. "If it reaches too many people, it starts choosing for itself." My phone buzzed again. "You're running out of time," my contact said. Not because of the clock, because of attention. That was the second plot twist. Time wasn't the real danger. Focus was. I began to understand then. The story wasn't bound to midnight because of superstition. It was bound to the moment when fewer people were awake, when attention was scarce, when listening was intentional, not accidental. The more people who tuned in, the stronger it became. Another voicemail notification appeared. Then another. different numbers. Same timestamp range. They're finding each other, the message warned. Just like before. What do they want? I asked. To be heard, came the reply. And you taught them how. I leaned back against the bed, overwhelmed. I had thought the main conflict was remembering, or choosing whether to tell the story. Now it was clear that the real problem was control. I had lost it once, and the consequences were spreading faster this time. A sudden thought made my stomach drop. Are you even on my side? I typed. The reply came slower than any before. I'm on the side of containment, it said. That used to be you. Before I could respond, the lights in my room flickered. Just once. Enough to make my breath catch. The phone vibrated immediately after. Did you feel that? The message asked. Yes, I typed. So did they, came the reply. You're connected again. Another text arrived from the unknown number, longer this time. We're not supposed to be awake, but we are. We hear it when it's quiet. We hear it say your name. My heart pounded. It says my name? I whispered, though no one could hear me. You were the anchor, my contact replied. You gave it a voice. The clock changed to 2:07 a.m. I realized then that the second plot twist wasn't just that others were involved. It was that I wasn't just a victim or a witness. I had been a starting point, a doorway, maybe even an invitation. You can still slow this down, the message said, but it will cost you more than before. What does that mean? I asked. It means choosing silence, came the reply, when everything in you wants to explain. Another voicemail arrived, and then another. My phone felt heavier in my hand with each one, like it was pulling me towards something I wasn't ready to face. The notebook lay open beside me, its last page still blank. The messages kept coming. The calls didn't stop. And somewhere, in rooms just as dark as mine, other people were awake now, listening to the quiet, waiting for a story they didn't yet understand, but somehow felt was meant for them. The window was still open. And this time, I wasn't sure I was the one deciding how wide. The calls stopped all at once. Not gradually. Not one by one. Just silence, sudden and complete, like someone had flipped a switch. My phone felt strangely light in my hand, as if whatever pressure had been building inside it had released. For a moment, I thought it was over, that the story had finally lost interest. Then the screen lit up with one last message. Now. I didn't ask what that meant. I already knew. The notebook beside me felt heavier than before, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. I picked it up and turned to the last page again. Blank. Clean. Ready. My heart was pounding, but underneath the fear was something else too. Recognition. This wasn't about stopping the story. It was about finishing it the right way. I typed one final question. If I do this, does it end? The reply came slower than ever. It ends the way it's supposed to, the message said. Not clean, but contained. That was enough. I put the phone face down and focused on the notebook. The rules I had written years ago came back to me all at once, not as words on a page, but as instincts. Don't rush. Don't explain everything. Don't give it more attention than it needs. The story feeds on focus, but it also needs structure. I began to write. Not names, not places, just the truth, stripped down and careful. I wrote about the quiet, about how listening too hard can turn into an invitation, about how curiosity, when shared at the wrong time, can spread faster than fear. I wrote about the boundary we built, not to trap anything, but to give it limits. As I wrote, the pressure behind my eyes eased. The room felt lighter, like it was slowly exhaling. The whispering I hadn't even realized was still there, faded into something distant and dull, like a radio losing signal. Halfway down the page, my phone buzzed once. I didn't look at it. I kept writing. I wrote the ending the way it was meant to be told. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just firm. A reminder that not every story needs an audience, and not every voice needs to be followed. Some things exist only because we keep listening. When I finished the last sentence, the clock on the wall changed. 2:47 a.m. The exact time that used to wake me up for no reason at all. The notebook felt warm in my hands. Then, normal. Just paper again. Just ink. I closed it gently and placed it back in the box, sealing it the way I should have years ago. My phone buzzed again. This time, I pick it up. One message. From the same contact. It's done. I waited, breath held. What about the others? They'll forget the edges, came the reply. The fear will fade. The rest will feel like a dream. I thought of the voices in the voicemails. The panic. The confusion. And me. There was a longer pause than ever before. You'll remember enough, the message said. That's the cost. The screen went dark. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. I sat there until the sky outside the window began to lighten. The deep blue of night slowly giving way to gray. Cars passed on the street again. A door slammed somewhere nearby. Normal sounds returned, one by one, like the world rebooting itself. By the time the sun came up, the night felt distant. Manageable. I stood up, stretched, and told myself it was over. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. The notebook wasn't in the box. It was on my desk, open, to the last page. There was new writing there. Not mine. Just one line, written neatly, calmly. You told it well this time. My phone buzzed softly, not with a message, but with a notification I didn't recognize. A podcast alert. A video suggestion. A title catching my eye in a way that made my stomach drop. This story is told only after midnight. I stare at the screen, understanding settling in slowly, painfully. I had finished the story. But finishing, it hadn't ended it. It had released it. I didn't click the notification right away. I just stared at it, letting the weight of everything settle. The room looked ordinary in daylight. Too ordinary. The desk, the chair, the faint dust in the air. It was hard to believe that only hours ago the same space had felt like the center of something much larger. I closed the notebook carefully. This time it stayed closed. No warmth. No pull. Just paper and ink again. Whatever boundary I had rebuilt, it was holding. I powered my phone off and set it aside. For the first time since the night began, I wasn't afraid of missing something. That felt important. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching people go about their mornings. Someone walking a dog. A delivery truck pulling away. Life continuing, unaware of how close it had brushed against something it didn't need to know. And that, I realized, was the point. The story had never been about fear. It was about attention. Later that day, I checked my phone again. No missed calls. No unknown numbers. No messages waiting. The video suggestion was still there, but when I refreshed the page, it was gone. Like it had never existed at all. That answered one question. The story could surface, but it didn't have to stay. Over the next few days, I noticed small changes. The restless feeling that used to creep in at night didn't come back. I slept through midnight without waking. The quiet felt normal again, not charged. When I thought about the notebook, it felt distant, like remembering a dream after it's already started to fade. I did hear from one person, though. A friend I hadn't spoken to in years sent a casual message. Just checking in. No mention of voices or late nights or remembering anything strange. We exchanged a few lines, nothing heavy. When I asked how they were sleeping, they said, better lately. No idea why. That was enough. I thought about the others too. The ones who had listened without knowing the rules. I couldn't be sure what they remembered, but I trusted the ending I had written. Forgetting the edges wasn't a punishment. It was a mercy. As for the voice that guided me through the night, the one focused on containment, I never heard from it again. I don't know if it was a person, a part of myself, or something shaped by the story itself. I stopped trying to define it. Some things don't need names to be understood. Weeks passed. Then months. The notebook stayed where I put it, sealed and untouched. I didn't destroy it. That would have been the wrong move. Stories don't like being erased. They like being finished and left alone. Sometimes, very rarely, I still wake up a few minutes after midnight. When that happens, I don't reach for my phone. I don't listen for whispers. I just lie there and breathe, letting the moment pass without giving it more attention than it deserves. That's one of the takeaways I never wrote down but learned the hard way. Not every thought needs to be followed. Not every mystery needs to be opened. And not every story wants an audience. If you're listening to this now, especially after midnight, that's the other thing you should know. Stories like this don't spread because they're scary. They spread because they feel personal. Because they make you think the quiet is speaking just to you. Most of the time, it isn't. The quiet is just quiet. Midnight is just an hour. And stories only have power when we give them more attention than they need. I told this one because it was unfinished. Because leaving it hanging would have done more harm than letting it end. Now it's complete. Not locked away, but settled. Like a book returned to a shelf where it belongs. If you ever feel that pull late at night, that sense that something is waiting for you to listen, remember this. You get to choose where your attention goes. You always have. Some stories are meant to be heard. Others are meant to be left alone. And this one has finally said everything it needs to say.